I will tell you that lots of Australian viewers of the Mark Dolan show don't want to see Harry and Meghan. The reason
100%.
why it went down well in 2018.
What is happening around Meghan Markle right now is turning into a full-scale media storm, and it is growing by the day. This is no longer just another celebrity headline or one more round of online criticism. What we are seeing now is a collision of bad timing, public skepticism, industry chatter, and a series of reported decisions that are all being examined at once. Australia is back in the conversation. Netflix is back in the conversation. Royal drama is back in the conversation. And when all of that hits at the same time, the result is chaos. Stay with me, because the deeper you go into this story, the messier it gets. Let's start with Australia, because that is where a lot of the latest attention is coming from. A luxury women's event reportedly connected to Meghan has been getting a lot of scrutiny, and not for the reasons anyone would want. This was supposed to feel exclusive, polished, elite. Instead, it has triggered a wave of questions online. And in the media, reports have suggested that tickets were priced at a level many people considered shockingly high, especially for the experience being described. And the moment people started comparing the price tag to what guests were allegedly getting in return, the reaction changed fast. The entire thing started to look less like a premium experience and more like a branding gamble that could easily backfire. That is where the bigger questions began. Who approved this setup? Who checked the numbers? Who looked at the optics? Because when a high-profile name is attached to something expensive, the public expects it to be airtight. Instead, critics are saying it looks rushed, messy, and poorly thought through. And then things became even more complicated when reports began circulating about financial trouble linked to the organizer. That took the conversation to a completely different level. Because now it was not just about an overpriced event. It became about judgment, vetting, and whether the people behind it had done enough homework before tying this to such a globally recognized figure. That is when the internet really locked in. Because once people sense a gap between image and reality, they do not let it go. And the details only made the situation look worse. For a price point that sounded ultra-premium, people expected privacy, luxury, and a truly exclusive experience. But according to reports, what was actually being discussed did not match that expectation at all. Critics immediately jumped on. The contrast, asking how something marketed with high-end prestige could leave so many basic questions unanswered. That is the danger with celebrity branding. You are not just selling an event, you are selling an idea. And the moment that idea feels inflated, people start pulling it apart piece by piece. Now here is where this gets even more interesting. Reports have claimed that Meghan's usual high-level PR structure may not have been the one steering this arrangement. Instead, attention has shifted toward other figures said to be involved behind the scenes, including people tied to influential social and media circles. If that is true, it changes how people read the situation entirely. Because then the story becomes less about a polished strategy and more about side-door decisions made without the kind of oversight a major public figure normally relies on. And once that narrative takes hold, every silence starts to look suspicious. Because, according to the chatter surrounding this, communication has allegedly become difficult, calls unanswered, plans unclear, questions hanging in the air. Whether that is fully accurate or not, the impression being created is damaging enough on its own. In a media cycle like this, perception moves faster than proof. And then comes the twist that has made the whole thing even more volatile. There is growing speculation that if this situation fully unravels, people involved behind the scenes could start speaking publicly. And that is where a contained controversy can turn into a complete disaster. Because once insiders begin talking, the conversation stops being about one event and starts becoming about the system around it, the decisions, the relationships, the private frustrations, the things the public was never supposed to see. That possibility alone has made this story much bigger than it first appeared. But the Australia angle is only one piece of it, because behind all of this is another reported layer, and that is Prince Harry. There have been claims that Harry may have originally wanted this Australia visit to focus more on his own role and his own priorities, especially given his long-standing ties to military communities there. But according to circulating reports, things may have shifted behind the scenes, with Meghan becoming part of the spotlight in a way that changed the tone of the trip entirely. Now, Whether that is exactly how it happened or not, the speculation is already out there. And it matters because it feeds a much bigger public narrative, the idea that what starts as one thing around Harry and Meghan rarely stays simple for long. And if Harry did want a cleaner, more focused visit, then the timing of this controversy could not be worse. Because now any appearance, any speech, any event connected to the trip risks being overshadowed by the noise surrounding everything else. That brings us to the entertainment industry side of this story, and this is where the pressure appears to intensify. When major media outlets begin discussing your reputation, people pay attention. When respected industry publications start reflecting frustration, tension, or fatigue around your public brand, it is no longer just tabloid noise. It becomes part of the way Hollywood talks about you, and that is why the recent discussion around Meghan's media era has attracted so much attention. There are reports suggesting that some industry figures have grown increasingly skeptical about the long-term results of the high-profile partnerships that once looked unstoppable. The issue is not simply whether deals were made. It is whether those deals delivered the level of impact people expected. Big announcements can create buzz, but buzz fades quickly if the output does not consistently match the buildup. That is the problem with living under constant spotlight. Every launch becomes a test. Every partnership becomes a scoreboard. Every delay becomes a headline. And in Meghan's case, critics argue that the gap between promise and payoff is becoming harder to ignore. Supporters, of course, see it very differently. They argue that she has been judged more harshly than others, that every move is overanalyzed, and that attempts to build something outside the royal system are always going to face resistance. That argument is very real too, and that is exactly why this story remains so combustible. There are two completely different interpretations of the same public image, and they keep crashing into each other. Then you add Harry back into the picture, and the conversation becomes even more loaded. Because whenever Harry appears alongside all of this, the public immediately starts comparing versions of him. The prince people once saw as the relatable soldier, the Invictus champion, the royal with broad public affection, versus the Harry they see now, tied to constant controversy, media battles, and endless scrutiny. To some people, that change represents independence and a break from an old system. To others, it looks like a dramatic fall from the image he once had. And that split in public opinion is what keeps reigniting the story. Now add books, biographies, and insider commentary to the mix, and the narrative gets even bigger. Because once authors, royal commentators, and television personalities start piling on with their own interpretations, the story stops being one incident at a time. It turns into a full ecosystem of commentary. Suddenly, it is not just one article or one appearance. It is a running argument about influence, identity, loyalty, image, and whether the entire post-royal brand strategy was ever sustainable. And that is really the question hanging over everything, right now. Was this built to last? Or was it always too dependent on attention staying hot? That question matters because attention is not the same thing as stability. Headlines can keep you visible, but they do not automatically build trust. Public interest can keep you trending, but it does not guarantee goodwill. And when a brand depends heavily on perception, even small cracks can widen very fast. That is exactly what critics say is happening now. They point to the event controversy, the public reaction, the questions around media deals, and the ongoing royal tension, then argue that it all adds up to a larger pattern, a pattern where the image is carefully presented, but the results keep attracting doubt. On the other side, supporters say this is just another wave of coordinated negativity, another attempt to frame ambition as failure, another example of people refusing to let Meghan succeed on her own terms. And maybe that is why this story refuses to die, because it is not just about facts, it is about interpretation. One side sees collapse, the other sees unfair targeting. One side sees mismanagement, the other sees relentless hostility. One side sees a public image unraveling, the other sees a woman being judged under a microscope no one else could survive. And in the middle of all that, the public keeps watching. That brings us back to Australia, because the symbolism there is hard to ignore. Years ago, Harry and Meghan arrived as working royals and drew enormous attention. Crowds were excited. The mood was upbeat. The visit carried the energy of a major royal moment. But now, Any return is being viewed through a totally different lens. The context has changed. Their role has changed. Public opinion has changed. And that contrast alone is enough to fuel weeks of commentary. What once looked like momentum now looks, to critics at least, like a test of relevance, a test of public appetite, a test of whether their names still carry the same power when the royal framework is no longer behind them. And that is why so many people are watching this so closely. Because whether these events go ahead smoothly or not, whether the media coverage grows harsher or not, whether supporters rally or critics dominate, this moment feels bigger than one appearance. It feels like a checkpoint, a moment where multiple storylines are colliding at once: celebrity branding, royal fallout, media expectations, public patience, and the always unpredictable battle between image and reality. So now the biggest question is simple. What happens next? Does this all blow over like so many past controversies? Does it get worse if more details come out? Or does it mark a real turning point in how the public sees Meghan and Harry moving forward? That is what everyone is trying to figure out right now. And honestly, that is why this story has become impossible to ignore.